Two trains leave Grand Central Station at 10 a.m. on Monday. Both trains are traveling 2,500 miles due west. Train A will make 13 stops along the way. 2/3 of the stops will be at night, and the remaining stops will be during the day. The day stops are 57% longer than the night stops, except for one night stop, which is 32% longer than the average day stop. Train B will make 27% more stops than Train A and will...
Stop the train! Math exams can be tough, but never fear. Just like history exams, English exams, standardized exams, or exams that your teacher prepares for you, there are things you can do, strategies that you can use that can make preparing for and taking math tests a little more manageable. From the moment you enter school until the day you graduate, one of the most important things you learn is how to do math. And that little word, do, is especially important because that's what math is. It's something that you do. And that makes math different from other subjects. Understanding how math is different can really help you prepare for your exams. So what exactly are you doing when you're doing math? Well, basically you're solving problems. And that involves not only having conceptual understanding of the problem, but also knowing how to apply computational skills to solve that problem. Of course, when you first start out, the problems that you solve are very simple. But the further along you go in school, the more complex the problems become, so that the math problem you're solving when you're 7 is very different than the math problem you're solving when you're 17. This is one thing that makes math unique. Math is a sequential subject. In other words, there's an order in which you learn things. You know, first you learn to count, and then you learn to add, and then subtract, and then multiply. You wouldn't construct a quadratic formula before you knew how to add, would you? Even people who can do this kind of math began by counting on their fingers. One of the best strategies for preparing for a math exam is to cover your bases. That means attend all of your classes and do all of your assignments. And most importantly, clear up any misunderstandings you may have about the material. Because math builds upon previous knowledge. It's important that you understand each step along the way. If you only have a partial understanding of one concept, it may prevent you from learning another, and before you know it, you might find yourself completely lost. Another thing that distinguishes math from other subjects is that it's all about problem solving. There really is only one way to get good at solving math problems, and that's, well, to solve a lot of math problems. There's no getting around this. You learn how to solve problems by doing them, by repeated practice and application. In other words, you use your problem-solving skills in different kinds of situations. So another great strategy for preparing for a math test, whether that test is tomorrow or a month from now, is to set aside time every day to practice your problem-solving skills. Don't make the mistake of just practicing what you happen to be learning right now. Go back to previously learned material and redo old assignments. If you have a textbook, it can be an excellent resource. Most texts provide chapter reviews and end-of-chapter tests. Many offer mid-chapter reviews too. It's a good idea to go back and solve some of the problems that may have already been covered, because skills that are not routinely practiced will eventually become rusty. And consider this. Once you know how to read, you basically know how to read. It's very unlikely that you'll forget, even if you read very little. But math? Well, if you don't keep your math skills sharp by practicing and applying those skills in problem-solving situations, these skills just have a way of disappearing. Math has a language all its own. And in order to do well on any math test, you've got to make sure you're fluent in that language. Whether it's algebra, geometry, probability, or statistics, make sure you know your mode from your mass. If if you know what I mean.
Okay, so we need to find the hypotenuse of this right triangle.
We'll use the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared.
Right. As long as we know the length of the legs, we can figure it out.
Right.
Whether it's variables, volume, or vertical angles, make sure you know the vocabulary. Many textbooks provide lists of important terms somewhere in each chapter. Your teacher will also use key vocabulary as he or she explains the material to you. You don't want to have the test in front of you and be unable to answer the questions simply because you don't know the meaning of some of the words. Make sure you know what each term means, and if you're not sure, ask. There are several different types of questions that you'll encounter on a math exam. Mechanics problems usually have a set of steps that you must follow in a specific order to arrive at the right answer. These problems test your ability to remember and execute each step of the problem as well as your computation skills. In order to solve this long division problem, you need to know correct procedure, divide, multiply, subtract, and how to perform each one of those computational functions. You'll see lots of examples of mechanics problems in your math textbooks and on the test your teacher prepares for you. The best way to prepare for a test in which you know you'll be expected to solve mechanics problems is to spend time every day practicing. One strategy is to write down problems from your textbook onto flashcards. Put the problem on the front and the solution on the back. Once you've made your cards, you can quiz yourself by working out each problem on a separate sheet of paper, then turning the card over to check your answer. One of the advantages of this strategy is that if you save all of your flashcards, you can use them later to get ready to study for the midterm or the final. No matter what type of math you're doing, you will still need to use some very basic computation, so it's important to practice basic math skills too. It'd be a shame to get a problem like this wrong simply because you multiplied incorrectly. Because mechanics problems usually require you to follow a particular procedure in order to arrive at the correct answer, it's a good idea to make sure that you have the steps of that procedure memorized. Mnemonic devices are tricks that can help you retrieve information you've already memorized. In other words, they can help you remember all of the steps involved in solving mathematical problems. An acronym is a mnemonic device. It's basically a group of letters that form an easy-to-remember word, and each letter in that word stands for another word, like laser stands for light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. Or this one, for those trigonometry fans. SOHCAHTOA can help you remember sine equals opposite over hypotenuse, cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent equals opposite over adjacent. If you're already factoring algebra problems, then you've already probably encountered FOIL, which helps you remember the order in which you need to multiply terms. First terms, outer terms, inner terms, last terms. Acrostics are another kind of mnemonic device. They are invented sentences, usually silly ones, in which the first letter of each word is a memory cue. You know the old, "My very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas." Or this one, "King Henry died Monday drinking chocolate milk," which can help you remember metric measurement. Of course, there's nothing to stop you from inventing one of your own. Math tests often contain data analysis questions. These types of problems will require you to either interpret information that is presented on a graph, table, chart, or plot, or to create one of those things when you are given certain data. For instance, here's a data table that contains statistics relating to the level of physical activity among high school students. So what do you do if you encounter something like this on a math test?
Well, I just take out my calculator. I wouldn't even think of setting foot into a math exam without my trusty protractor.
Protractor? Calculator? The first thing you do is carefully read the question.
Using the data table, create a multiple line graph that shows the percentage of high school students, both male and female, who do not engage in the recommended amount of daily physical activity.
Next, make sure that your graph is big enough to contain all the information. Then, label each axis. Finally, make sure that you title your graph. Accurate understanding of the material is essential But just as important is labeling. Have a look at this graph. It is virtually meaningless because you can't figure out from the information provided what it's all about. But start adding labels, and its meaning becomes crystal clear. One of the most common types of problems you'll encounter on math exams are word problems. Word problems can test your mathematical ability, your logic, or both. These types of problems are very common on standardized exams. You know, the tests that everybody takes at the same time each year. And of course, on the SAT. Word problems not only test your mathematical ability, but also your flexibility. In other words, how well you can apply what you know to unfamiliar situations. Now, what is it that makes these problems so tricky?
Well, sometimes I'm not exactly sure what I'm being asked, so I don't even know where to start.
Most of the time I know what I'm being asked, but I just can't seem to figure out the best strategy for solving the problem.
Those tests are timed, so you don't have all day to try to figure out what you're supposed to do.
Excellent point. Most math tests are timed, so you need to go into the test with strategies that you can use to solve any type of word problem that you encounter. So, word problem strategy number 1. Read the problem slowly and carefully. It is also important to underline key words in the problem. Are you looking for the sum, the difference, the perimeter? Doing this will help you process the information.
The seats in the school auditorium are numbered from 1 to 250. Tom, Ron, and John are sitting in seats numbered 15, 16, and 17. Tom is not in seat 15. John is sitting between Tom and Ron. Who is in seat 17?
Word problem strategy number 2. Determine what you're expected to find out.
Okay, so basically we need to find out who is sitting in seat 17. And all this stuff about how many seats are in the auditorium is not important, so we can disregard it.
Strategy number 3. Devise a plan by identifying the techniques that will help you solve the problem. Plans can involve anything depending upon what type of word problem you are solving. It can be a picture, graph, a table, setting up some kind of equation, a diagram, or a tally sheet.
Right. So what do we actually know?
We know that Tom is not in seat 15, and that John is sitting between Tom and Ron. So seats 15, 16, and 17.
Okay.
Put John in the middle seat, seat 16, because he's sitting between Tom and Ron. And put Ron in seat 15, so that means that Tom's in seat 17.
Okay.
Now that was a logic word problem that didn't involve any mathematical equations or calculations in order to solve. But here's one that does.
8 students were doing an experiment in science class. The lengths of time taken by each student were 32 minutes, 26 minutes, 37 minutes, 23 minutes, 42 minutes, 38 minutes, 32 minutes, and 42 minutes. What was the average time needed to complete the science experiment?
We need to find an average, so we have to set up some math problems, like this. After you've solved the problems you've created, it's always a good idea to convert the solution back into words. This will help you determine if you solved the original problem. So, in this case, we might say,
The average time it took 8 students to complete the science experiment was 34 minutes.
probably the most common type of question that you'll encounter on a standardized math exam or the SAT are multiple choice questions. You know the kind. You're asked a question and then you're presented with 4 or 5 possible choices, only one of which is correct. Multiple choice math questions require different strategies. Let's find out how some students handle them. Roll the tape.
Math multiple choice? You mean there's a strategy for answering them? Great, now you tell me.
No, not that tape.
I use the eeny, meeny, miny, mo strategy.
No, Not that tape either?
Math multiple choice. Oh, sure. I use estimation on those kinds of questions.
Eureka! Estimation. When it comes to math multiple choice on standardized test exams, think of estimation as one of your best friends. You see, standardized tests are timed, and not only is it unlikely that you'll have time to work out the math for every single problem, in some cases, it may not even really be necessary. Many questions on standardized exams that are actually testing your ability to estimate in addition to your ability to recognize the right answer. But that's not the only strategy. There are others.
I like to use mental math.
Excellent. Using mental math as opposed to pencil and paper calculation can also save you some time. And on standardized tests and on the SAT, time is of the essence. Let me show you what I mean. This problem is all about exponential growth. But you don't really need to work out the math on paper to figure out the right answer. Let's use a simpler but similar problem to see how both estimation and mental math can work together to help you get the right answer. This problem is also about exponential growth. The first few numbers tell you the relationship between all of the numbers. So the next number will be the product of 56 multiplied by 2, and that is a product that can either be estimated or worked out by using mental math. The correct answer is C. When taking a math multiple choice test, you should think of the answer options as part of the question. They can actually guide you toward the right answer.
What I do is read the question and the options. Then I decide whether I can recognize the right answer or use estimation or mental math to get the right answer.
Because you don't want to use time to work out the calculation if it's not really necessary. But if none of those strategies work, you're going to need a backup plan.
Well, first, I eliminate any options that I know are just plain wrong. Then I do the math to get to the right answer.
So recognition, estimation, and mental math are the three strategies that you use first before you go on to working out the calculations.
If I think one of my estimates or mental math calculations is a little shaky, I mark it so that if I have time, I can go back and actually do the math.
That's a great tip. On time tests, you got to keep moving. But there's nothing wrong with marking the problems that you weren't so sure about and then going back to them later, if you have time. Of course, you're not going to be able to just recognize every correct answer or estimate your way through an entire test. There will be plenty of problems that will need to be worked out. But there are ways to deal with them too. First, read the problem slowly and carefully. Next, read all of the options because they can help you figure out the correct answer. Locate the words in the problem that tell you what to do. Words like find, solve, define, and underline them. Make a note of any relevant formulas, definitions that may apply to the problem you need to solve. Solve the problem. If your solution is one of the options, then select it. If your solution is not, rework the problem. Then double-check your solution just to be sure. And whatever you do, don't fall into a trap. On math multiple choice tests, there's often a lure to get you to jump to an incorrect answer. Here's what I'm talking about. If 1 is added to each of the digits of 22,222, the resulting sum would be, if you were not careful, you might see that word sum and say to yourself, well, all I have to do is add 22,222 and 11,111, which would give you 33,333. Now, look carefully at option A. The first thing you see is the number, 33,333. So you may be tempted to select it. Of course, if you did, you'd be dead wrong. The correct answer is D, because the resulting sum is 11,111 greater than 22,222, not 33,333 greater than 22,222. So the lesson is, don't jump to conclusions. When working with math multiple choice problems, read the question and the options carefully. Underline important words, note any relevant formulas, solve the problem, then double-check your work. Sometimes, math tests may require that you not only solve a problem, but that you write about how you arrived at the solution. The most important thing here is to be clear and straightforward. Your purpose is simply to explain how you arrived at the correct answer. So, if you were explaining this, here's how you do it. First, briefly restate the problem. Then, make sure to include all the steps you took to solve the problem. If there were several steps, break your explanation down into paragraphs. Use the correct math vocabulary. Use particular words and phrases like because, it follows that, and finally. Also, make sure that you include any particular formulas you used and explain them. If you use a chart or graph in your explanation, label everything so that it can be easily understood. And avoid using the word it. Don't write things like, I solved it. Be very clear about what it is. And don't forget the obvious stuff. Write legibly and reread your explanation to make sure it makes sense. Whether you're taking a standardized exam or a math test that your teacher has prepared, there are some general strategies that you can use to help you perform better. One of the most important is to find out the rules of the test. Knowing them in advance will not only affect how you prepare for the exam, but also how you take the exam. You'll need to find out how many test questions there will be, how long you'll have to take the test, what you'll need to bring with you, calculator, protractor, whether you have to memorize formulas or if they will be provided, and most importantly, how the test will be scored. That means knowing if you should leave questions unanswered or if they will be marked wrong if you do. This will determine whether it's worthwhile to make an educated guess, and it usually is. Another useful strategy is to perform a memory dump.
A what?
A memory dump? That's when you jot down any formulas you may need to work out the problems on a test. It's also a good idea to start with the problems that you know first. This kind of builds up your confidence. Make sure you show all of your work. Sometimes you can get partial credit even if you got the answer wrong. And don't skip problems with a lot of steps, even if you don't know how to do all the steps. Do the parts you know, because sometimes you can get credit for that too. Sometimes, on math tests, you have to rewrite problems, so it's important to make sure that you rewrote them correctly.
If I'm using a calculator, I double-check my entries because it's really easy to enter a wrong number.
After you get an answer, ask yourself if it makes sense. You know, does it seem reasonable? If it doesn't, rework the problem. Check your answers to make sure they're complete. If the answer is 14 kilograms, just don't answer 14. Because most tests are timed, it's important that you work at a steady pace. Just keep moving. If you do have time left, go back and check your work. Rework from scratch as many problems as you can. Use all of the time that's available to you. So, what's the formula for achieving a favorable outcome on a math exam? Well, let's simplify. Odds are that the more time you spend solving problems and reviewing previously learned material, the greater the probability that you'll earn a high score. So that the next time those two trains leave Grand Central Station, they'll actually have a chance of getting where they're going.